Welcome to Something to Wrestle With.
Something to wrestle with.
Bruce Prichard.
Bruce Prichard.
Well, you know.
That's not a rib.
She pooed it.
For every great idea in the wrestling business, there are 10 not so great ones. That's the way it works. You sift through the sand at times to discover that one real gem. Brain farts. We all have them, including yours truly. And then he rattles off a couple of McMahon's not so great ideas. One of Vince McMahon's ideas, according to Russo, was to have Goldust in a full body stocking as the naked guy. I think you guys actually did this with Midian. Putting Sable with the human oddities was Vince McMahon's idea. He even says that Vince wanted Golga to be a hunchback whose shoulders couldn't be pinned to the mat. Now that feels like the old WCW pitch. Do you remember this Golga hunchback idea?
No, the idea with Golga was that the mask that he was going to wear was going to have huge bulges in the head.
Yeah.
But that was it.
And he says that Vince thought nobody would understand the Blonde Bitch Project, which was a spoof of the Blair Witch Project with Stevie Richards and Blue Meanie. And he said, even though they shot this with Ed Ferrara, when they showed it to Vince, he thought nobody would understand it because no one saw the movie. Of course, it was a huge box office attraction and it drew a lot of money. But because Vince didn't see it, he didn't think anybody else would see it either. So Russo sort of dumps on McMahon's ideas here, but some of those don't really seem as bad as some of the stuff that people associate with Russo. I'm not saying McMahon isn't capable of bad ideas. We know he is, but it feels like
we all are.
Yeah. It feels like if you're going to make a case against Vince McMahon's creative genius, you could pick better, or in this case, I guess, worse examples. What are some of the worst ideas you remember Vince Russo coming up with?
Well, the number one worst idea that he ever came up with was the Brawl for All, and it ended a lot of careers. It was a horrible idea, horrible conception, just on down the line. And of course, you can listen to that whole thing and what I think of that in our archives of the Brawl for All. But he came up with the oddities, everything that he did with Howard Stern people, Insane Clown Posse, Beaver Cleavage, Public Enemy, Nicole Bass, and the bloodbaths with the Brood, and the list just goes on and on.
So let's talk about this. The time that Russo invited Howard Stern's Whack Pack to Raw to join the Human Oddities. He says that Paul Bearer was near him in Gorilla and said, "Vince, you just slapped all the boys in the face." Coming from Bearer, that hurt. I'd always considered him a friend because he was always honest with me. Well, this time his honesty was slapping my bearded puss, but I knew that Paul had no idea how these freaks would help change the business and the success of the WWF forever. It was just another stage reshaping the industry. But that's how it was for me early on. Who is this guy and why is he doing this? There's no doubt that people were laughing at me at the beginning. There's no doubt that some wanted to kill me from the start. But at the time, I had to stick with my instincts. I just knew I was right. 2 short years later, the knives in my back were magically turning into pats. What did you think about the Whack Pack being involved in the WWF? And did you ever have a conversation with Paul Bearer about it?
I hated the Whack Pack. I thought it was horrible. It was just a joke, and having to deal with them in the back was a huge pain in the ass, having people on crack and drunk all over the place. If that's what you want to portray your business and your creativity, taking someone else's idea and putting it on your show, I thought it was horrible. I didn't like it, and I thought it was horrible.
Well, let's break this down. Those freaks would help change the business and the success of the WWF forever. It was just another stage in reshaping the industry. How did the oddities and the Whack Pack change the business and the success of the WWF forever, Bruce?
You're asking the wrong guy. It was terrible. It was just absolutely terrible. I guess maybe it changed it and it gave people an opportunity. It's something to point back to and say that was bad.
Now that we've done that, because I know everybody wanted to hear some bad ideas, let's hear some of the good ones.
I love the way that Russo incorporated the 3 faces of Foley. And to be clear, because somebody said this the other day, the Dude Love whole thing just so everybody knows where that came from as well. Yeah, that was Mick Foley's creation. That came from a conversation in Toronto in the dressing room between Mick Foley and Shawn Michaels. And Shawn and Mick were talking after their match, and Shawn said something about Mick Foley, you know, he was mankind, and just about the way that Mick looked. And Mick looked up at him and says, well, gosh, Shawn, I always wanted to be you. And Mick, and he says, what do you mean? He goes, oh, my alter ego was Dude Love. I was the sexiest. I was, you know, had the long hair, and I was this sexy guy that all the girls loved, and I was Dude Love. And he talked about having videotape of this character. I asked him for the tape. I said, I got to see this. And I told the story of, you know, hey, Mick Foley always saw himself as this good-looking babyface character like Shawn Michaels. And Dude Love was born. And then I loved the way that they incorporated the three faces of Foley and the utilization of Mick Foley, and just getting to see that whole broad spectrum of what he could do. And I loved the Stooges. I loved the way that he used Pat Patterson and Jerry Briscoe and had fun with them. That was some entertaining stuff.
Russo wrote in his book that WrestleMania 15 was supposed to be a three-way with Rock, Austin, and Foley, but that Shawn Michaels came to TV and got in Steve's ear and told him that it should just be Rock and Austin. So Austin goes to Vince to change it, and Vince caved. Russo said that he was the one tasked to give the bad news to Mick, and that Russo was livid at Shawn for doing this and buried him to Hunter. That, of course, gets back to Shawn, who then threatens to kick Vince Russo's ass. And eventually, after all the dust settles, Russo says that Vince realizes that Shawn created all of this. And he wrote, Vince never wanted to see or hear from Shawn Michaels again. He was just flat done with him. Do you remember Shawn being a shit disturber at WrestleMania 15 and Vince thinking, you know what, we just need to put him on the shelf for a while?
I remember this whole incident, and I remember Shawn Michaels confronting Russo and telling him, he goes, I may not be able to kick a lot of people's ass, but I know I can kick your ass.
That was in his book too. He put that.
Yeah. So this was just during time that they brought Shawn back for some different things. Shawn had an idea, took it to talent, and anytime when you're in that creative process, you get so married to your ideas and you have pride of authorship. It's happened to me, happened to Russo, it's happened to everybody that's been in that position. That talent change your stuff. And that's all that happened here.
Well, Russo claims that Val Venus was one of his best ideas too. He says it was probably his favorite creation next to Goldust. And he says back when he was looking to come up with a character for somebody, he would go look at interviews that they would do at the training facility, and then something would just come to him. He said he thought that Morley looked sleazy, and the guy creating a porn star was born. He thinks his early vignettes were some of his best work. And he thought that Val could have been a huge WWF star, but the outside pressure forced Vince to kill the character. Do you think that the WWF missed the boat with Val Venus, and did Russo create Val's character?
Russo did create Val's character. You know, it's interesting. There seems to be a pattern here that if Russo creates it, it's great, and then Vince McMahon kills it. And because it's so great. Val Venus, unfortunately, that character is going to limit you. It's going to limit you to a certain point to be a former porn star. Personally, I thought that the character was great. I loved the gimmick. Loved Sean Morley, and had a lot of fun with the gimmick, and I liked the character. But there was only so far you could go with that character, unfortunately.